Welcome back to Moose on the Loose. My name's David, and today's top stories, we've got a few things here. Vassie Capellos of CTV, usually the one who's ripping into these liberals, seems like, I'll show you an interview here, it looks like she's been paid off. Maybe she got in trouble from the higher-ups for ripping too many liberals. I don't know what's going on. We got multiple other stories here. Jamil Javani, who is the conservative for the by-election in Durham, just won by a landslide. So we'll show you those results. I got some funny other things to show you here. But first off, we're going to jump into this interview.
Scott Moe. Hi, Premier. Good to have you back on the show. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you so much, Vassie.
There's a delay.
I think we have a little bit of a delay in the connection, so just to let the audience know that the Environment Minister, Premier, the federal Environment Minister, says your decision not to remit the carbon tax is, quote, immoral. The Energy Minister, you just heard on our program, spoke to us last night. He said it's appallingly bad judgment. Do you regret your decision to break the law?
No, we had, and what I find quite disappointing is that the government of Saskatchewan has had to do what it is doing. We had called for months for the federal government to treat all Canadians equally, to extend the decision that they made predominantly for Atlantic Canadians to all people in Canada and to all forms of heating oil. You know, winter comes and goes every year, and it gets pretty cold, and it's been pretty cold here the last few days as well. And what we asked for a number of months ago was for the federal government to extend this to all forms of heating oil for all Canadians, to do so with the idea of treating Canadian families equally. And we said if they did not, we would at least do what we could do to treat Saskatchewan families equally, and that's what we've done.
So what's weird about this, when she first asked that, she mentions about him breaking the law, and that's exactly what the David Cochrane interview was a few episodes ago. And that guy was clearly a diaper rash Trudeau supporter.
It could also be resolved, though, by the government of Saskatchewan following the law. Defy the law of the government of Canada. But you're a government, and you've got to uphold the law, and you're not doing it now. But this is the law, and you've now announced you're going to break the law.
I don't know. I can't really read her here. Like Vassie's face, she's so stone cold. I don't know if she's being forced to push this, like, oh, you broke the law narrative from coming up from the higher ups, or if she truly believes this, because she has ripped a lot of those liberals in the past.
But with due respect, Premier, that means that you are breaking the law. And it does set a precedent or an example, for example, to people in your province who decide that they don't like one tax or the other. What's your message for people who in Saskatchewan who don't like the PST or don't like paying income tax? Do as I say, not as I do?
No, certainly with respect to this is about treating all Canadians equally, including those in Saskatchewan. We said for months and months that the federal government has the ability to treat Canadian families equally, to remove the tax that they have on home heating oil, to extend that to natural gas, to electric heat, to propane heat, which many other Canadians use. We said if they did not do that, that we would look for ways to exempt Saskatchewan residents, and we found a couple of here. And I would say it's disappointing, and it's to quote the federal energy minister, it's unheard of and historic. I agree, but I'd say it's tremendously disappointing that it's come to a decision like this in our province when the federal government had the opportunity to treat Canadian families fair from coast to coast to coast.
Scott Moe says it straight there. It's just we're not getting treated fairly, and that's how it has to be. You can't just treat some one way and others the other way. It's ridiculous. We all pay taxes. Otherwise, we want to talk about Trudeau. I mean, I mentioned this in the last episode. Too many scandals. He just does whatever he wants. When we have a prime minister who doesn't follow any of the rules and everything's so corrupt,
I'm not taking away from the concern that you and the residents of your province have about the way in which the federal government made this decision and the political nature of it. But that also doesn't take away a line of accountability to your government about the avenues it had available to it to pursue. And by that, I mean, you could have gone back to court and challenged what the federal government did there. You could have, looked through those avenues instead of gone right to just not remitting the tax, which is very serious, as you said, very historic. It's a decision not to adhere to the law.
Yes, and we may still find ourselves going back to some of those avenues as well. What this does is, for at least half of this winter, treats Saskatchewan families equally as the federal government has chosen to make what is essentially the same decision in Atlantic Canada. All we did here was mirror the decision that the federal government made. They made a decision in Atlantic Canada that have impacted Atlantic Canadians. One of their ministers indicated it was very much a political decision. I think she suggested that we should elect more Liberal MPs from the Prairie provinces if we wanted to have a similar decision made in this space. That's disappointing. And so what we did is essentially mirrored the federal government's decision for Saskatchewan residents. We didn't go any further and we didn't go any less.
Checkmate, man.
But to be fair, and I take your point again on the political nature of it, Minister Hutchings made that comment on one of my programs. To be fair, though, what they announced was not just a pause for home heating. They also announced a doubling of the rural rebate, and that applies to 45% of the people who pay the carbon tax in Saskatchewan, whereas the exemption for home heating oil applies to about 25% of Atlantic Canadians. So could other Canadians not make the argument that the doubling of the rebate further advantages Saskatchewan over the rest of the country?
And we're still upside down in this province on the amount of dollars that we are paying in carbon tax versus the direct and indirect costs that it is costing Saskatchewan residents. And that amount that we are going to be underwater with respect to that formula is going to increase as the carbon tax increases. Listen, this has been, our decision, of which we highlighted months ago, said we were going to make this decision if the federal government didn't do the right thing and treat Canadian families equally, has been called, a number of names. Immoral is one of the names that I've heard. And the carbon tax, our foundational policy in this province is that it should be removed on everything for everyone. That continues to this day. The reason is because Saskatchewan residents pay more than they get back in any type of rebate, and that isn't fair either. And so we think this tax, in addition to being one of the major contributors to inflationary pressures, in addition to being one of the major contributors to what our families are experiencing in increased prices at the fuel pumps in the grocery store here in Saskatchewan, we think it should be removed on everything for everyone. But in the meantime, when the federal government is making a decision to remove this tax on home heating fuel, which we applaud, they should ensure that that is fair to all Canadians as well. And that's all we've done, is mirrored the federal government's decision on home heating fuel, extended that to natural gas and to electrical heat so that Saskatchewan families can be treated fairly, something that unfortunately the federal government chose not to do.
If you look at Vassie's face throughout that whole thing, she looks miserable. I still can't get a read on her if she's got a mandate from above that's forcing her to keep drilling this point, or if she actually believes what she's pushing here. But for the rest of this interview, you can see here that was about 60% of the interview, and back and forth is literally the exact same thing. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and they don't come to any sort of understanding. They literally just say the same thing.
Respectfully, Premier, that doesn't address the substance of my question.
Saskatchewan residents pay more than they get in the rebate. Our goal is to not pay any of that as families, and to ensure that we are continuing to innovate to reduce our emissions in other ways.
And Premier, I certainly do understand, again, the concern you have around the political nature of the announcement with home heating oil. But you said a lot of things there. Do you have evidence for them? For example, that the price on carbon has achieved nothing. Do you have any evidence to support that? Because in other jurisdictions, that hasn't been the case, that it's a huge contributor to inflation and inflationary costs at the grocery store. I mean, what we've heard from the Bank of Canada's governor is that, in fact, it's very difficult to be able to assess how much inflation has impacted grocery prices. Overall, it has impacted inflation to the tune of about 0.15%. Is it really fair to blame the carbon tax for every affordability issue that the residents of your province face? It's
also been identified, I believe, by the PEO and a number of other economists that, yes, the carbon tax is contributing to inflation. This is a federal government that introduced this unconsulted tax then committed that it would never rise above $50 a ton. Now, I believe on April the 1st of this year, we're going to hit $65 a ton. But indirectly, I think the impact may even be larger than what has been estimated in some of these reports. So it is very much, in my opinion, a large part of the inflationary challenges that Saskatchewan and Canadian families are experiencing.
Not to mention that the Bank of Canada has already stated that it's 20% of inflation is from the carbon tax, or 0.6% of the it was 3.4, now we're what, 2.9? It's 20%. So I don't know, somebody coming over from the government and going up CTV and twisting their arm there, you got to get that Vassy to stop ripping Liberals. Like, what's going on here, Vassy? I don't know. She looks miserable and grumpy. Yeah, let me know what your thoughts are down below, what you think's going on here. Next up, we have this video from Michael Cooper, which basically sums it up here at a committee meeting of all the corruption going on.
National security culture of the Government of Canada starts at the top. It starts with the Prime Minister, who has special responsibilities when it comes to national security. This Prime Minister set the tone for the national security culture when he said, famously, that he admires Beijing's basic dictatorship. In other words, he admires a brutal, authoritarian, genocidal regime.
And on that, we'll get to the rest of this video here in a second, but...
Would you describe Xi Jinping as a dictator?
This is from a year ago, or 6 months ago.
China's a one-party state. I don't think anyone would call it a democracy.
In 2013, you described China as a basic dictatorship. Mr. Xi was already in charge. Mr. Biden, the President of the United States, which is our security guarantor, also called him a dictator. Why won't you call him that?
We can get into all sorts of different definitions. The fact is, he's not running a democracy. It's an authoritarian state.
Would you describe Xi Jinping as a...
Trudeau, you worthless bag of crap.
And we have seen over the past 8 years of Justin Trudeau interference on the part of Beijing in our post-secondary institutions, interference in our elections, interference in the targeting of sitting members of Parliament, interference in terms of setting up illegal police stations, and the intimidation of Chinese Canadians. And now we have learned that Beijing was given unfettered access to some of Canada's most sensitive biological secrets. After 8 years of Justin Trudeau, Canada's national security culture is broken, and an incident on the scale of what happened in Winnipeg is a direct result of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well said, Michael Cooper. That's right on the nose there. Yep. One thing Justin Trudeau is not happy about is this by-election in Durham. So this was the projected results, what they thought would happen. Let's just look at this before we look at the actual results. 55% Conservative, 20% Liberal, 20% NDP, 3% PPC. So right, 50, 55, 20, 23. And we look at the actual results. 57.4% Conservative, landslide, just decimated the Liberals, who came in at 22%. So Liberals came in slightly higher than they thought, but NDP, what happened here? 10%! These guys fell off a cliff. And the PPC, you notice, they're up 1.4% when, or was it 3.3? 1.1%, like a percent more than expected. And then you've got, some other stuff in your Rhinoceros Party, 0.2%. What is this? Oh, but anyways, this is just a sign of the times here. This is what is to come. The flood is coming, the dam is breaking, and these crooked Liberals are getting washed out of Ottawa. They're getting washed out of Parliament. This is huge. Now, one thing I do want to note about this, which is disturbing, is this number here. So you're telling me that today, 7,285 people voted for the Liberals. Like, what's wrong with these people? Like, what? Why? I would love to know why they would, why? Why? At this point, it's not a matter of are you a Liberal, Conservative, NDP? It's a matter of we need to save our country because we got this absolute dictator running us into the ground and crushing us. What's wrong with you people? If you're a corrupt liberal, leave your comments down below. I'd love to hear, not in a mean way. I just want to know, why would you vote for someone who destroys our country? And it's probably lifelong liberals who are just diehards and they're not seeing straight. But that's disappointing. That get some brain scans happen in Durham here, because we've got some problems here. The other thing to note that they talk about here on breakfast television is that was Aaron O'Toole's former riding, and he was the Conservative leader, yet Jamel Giovanni won it at a higher rate than Aaron O'Toole. So check this out.
So the margins were interesting here. People were looking at how big the victory would be. Aaron O'Toole, last election out, a little over 45% of the vote in that region. Jamil Giovanni won with 57% of the vote.
Landslide.
Here are the numbers from last night. This is what they were cooking again. A big, big victory for the federal Conservatives in a region where housing, like many ridings across the country, are a major, major talking point.
It looks like a big win. A lot of Liberals were out there as well, canvassing on the ground, going door to door for Robert Rock.
Why?
Who was the Liberal candidate. And unfortunately, they lost by, 11,000 votes right there.
Oh, the party got rocked last night for sure. Like, whenever a by-election happens, Tim, you know this better than anyone, the morning after spin is interesting. You know, the losing side's usually, by-election, low turnout, not a big deal. Winning side is like, no, this isn't a poll. This is an actual thing that happened. This is an actual election. This isn't Angus Reid. This isn't Leger.
Not a poll.
This is people getting up off their couch and going. I can't get over how in this riding that was held, Aaron O'Toole was the leader of the Conservative Federal Party, and Jamil Giovanni upped the margins. I'm sorry. The Liberals have a major league problem. And I don't care how they spin this today, because let's say that goes up to 37% turnout, Mayor. I don't know if those margins change. The win is the win. You can tell me the margins go up by 20%. That is a deficit that you're going to have a hard time swinging around, regardless of who shows up. So I think the narrative that Pierre Poilievre has been spinning here in this specific riding has teeth. And the Liberals today are going to have a hard time turning this narrative around. I know it's one seat. I know it's a by-election. It's not the real election. That's a troubling sign. That's the canary in the coal mine. And the Liberals have a big issue here. When they up the total on a former party leader, that is wild to me. And we'll see how the federal Liberals respond. But hey, it's not the real election. It's a by-election. You got a championship belt out of it, but it's a by-election. We'll see where we go from here.
Well said. That is well said. Exactly it. So in other news, more of the Palestine protesters are in Vancouver, blocking more stuff as usual and hitting drums and stuff. And that's going to be copyright music, so we'll just turn that off. But yeah, this is, I used to live in Vancouver for 13 years. This looks like the, what was that, the Cambie Bridge or the Burrard Bridge? I haven't been there so long. They just put up so many towers there, and the place changes every year in Vancouver. There's so many towers being built. But needless to say, this looks like, an on-ramp that goes into, was this the Cambie Bridge or the Burrard Bridge? Yeah, they're completely blocking an on-ramp to downtown. I don't really understand why Palestinians are protesting in Canada. Should probably be protesting Canada and people sleeping on the streets personally, but you do you're allowed to protest. It's a hard thing to get support for when you're protesting something going on the other side of the planet. And I get it. It's terrible what's going on over there. I wish things would just get resolved over there, but I'm just telling you, most people are just trying to afford food and their bills, their rent. Speaking of which, in Toronto now, it is 1 out of 5 people are behind on their rent. 1 out of 5. I saw a story the other day of a dentist who's behind in her rent. She's making $120,000, or was it $160,000? $120,000 a year, and she's behind in her rent. That's the state of Canada right now. There's going to be a lot of people losing a lot of money, whether that's through rent and people not paying it, defaulting on losing their mortgages, losing their houses. There's going to be cascading effects to Justin Trudeau years ago saying that interest rates would be super low. Go ahead, buy houses. He pushed everyone to do that. He said that. Everyone took him at face value, and turns out he's a bonehead loser liar. And now people are in trouble. And finally here, you're going to see something very funny.
How dare you? You have stolen my dreams, my childhood with your empty words. Yet I'm one of the lucky ones. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams, my childhood with your empty words. Yet I'm one of the lucky ones.
I can't. It's like a fly the whole time. Oh, geez. I don't know who makes these things. It's hilarious. I didn't make that. That's funny, though. That's what we got for today's episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching to the end here. I greatly appreciate it. If you guys want to check out the merch, that's linked up down below. I've got a new silent hiking video. If you want to check that out, I'll link it up right here. Quiet boot steps in the forest, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and that's saying something because I've summited a lot of mountains at this point. If you're interested, check it out. Stay warm, stay fed. I'll see you guys in the next one.